As the winter snows of 1776 blanketed the northern colonies, the American Revolution simmered on two distinct fronts. In the frozen fields around Boston, General George Washington faced a grinding stalemate against the British garrison under Sir William Howe. There, the war was one of sieges and artillery, a test of endurance where Henry Knox's noble train of cannons promised to tip the balance. But hundreds of miles to the south, the conflict burned with a different fire, a brutal civil strife pitting neighbour against neighbour, Loyalist against Patriot, in a landscape of swamps, rivers, and simmering resentments. This was no distant rebellion. It was a tinderbox of divided allegiances, where the spark of royal authority could ignite a conflagration. The British High Command, ensconced in London and gazing across the Atlantic, saw opportunity in this southern divide. They believed the colonies from Virginia southward teemed with subjects still faithful to King George III, men and women weary of radical agitators, eager for the stability of crown rule. If properly supported, these loyalists could rise en masse, crushing the rebellion from within and restoring imperial order. It was a strategy born of optimism, perhaps even delusion, but one that shaped the early months of the war. Contemporary accounts from British officials painted a picture of a South ready to rally, where patriots were a vocal minority and the silent majority awaited only the arrival of redcoats to declare their true colours. At the heart of this plan stood Josiah Martin, the royal governor of North Carolina. Exiled from his capital by Patriot forces, Martin had taken refuge aboard a British warship in the Cape Fear River, plotting from the waves. In correspondence with his superiors, he assured the Crown that the province brimmed with untapped loyalty. Loyal subjects only wait for proper support to declare themselves, he proclaimed, promising that he could muster an army of up to 10,000 men, farmers, merchants and settlers who would flock to the king's standard if backed by a fleet and regulars. This was no idle boast. Martin, a seasoned administrator, staked his reputation on it, viewing North Carolina as the linchpin to reclaiming the South. Emboldened, Martin issued a formal proclamation in early February 1776, a call to arms that echoed through the backcountry. He urged all true subjects of the king to rally against the unnatural rebellion, to assemble and march in defence of their sovereign. The response was swift, though not as overwhelming as hoped. From the inland settlements came a force drawn largely from an unlikely quarter, the Scottish Highlanders. These were hardy emigrants who had crossed the ocean in the wake of the Jacobite Rising of 1745, fleeing defeat at Culloden and the harsh reprisals of the British Crown. In Scotland, their clans had once raised swords against the Hanoverian kings. Now, in the wilds of America, they pledged those same blades to George III. It was a poignant irony, driven by promises of land grants, a desire for peace after years of upheaval, and a cultural code of loyalty to authority. Many had sworn oaths to the king upon arrival, oaths they now honoured amid the chaos of revolution. Under the command of Brigadier General Donald MacDonald, a grizzled veteran of European wars and colonial campaigns, these Highlanders formed the backbone of the Loyalist column. Elderly and ailing, MacDonald embodied the old world's military traditions, while his deputy, Lieutenant Colonel Donald MacLeod, brought a fiercer zeal, eager to unleash the famed Highland charge. Their orders were clear: march eastward toward the coastal towns of Brunswick and Wilmington, where a grand British fleet was expected to rendezvous. This armada, laden with thousands of regular troops under the command of Lords Cornwallis and Clinton, would provide the muscle to sweep aside Patriot resistance. Together, Loyalists and Redcoats would secure North Carolina, then push northward, linking with forces in the middle colonies and strangling the rebellion in its cradle. But the seas are fickle, and the winds of the Atlantic conspired against them. Storms and logistical snarls delayed the fleet's arrival, stretching days into weeks, a fatal hesitation that left the Loyalists exposed and isolated. As the Highlanders shouldered their muskets and broadswords, the air hummed with the skirl of bagpipes and the murmur of Gaelic oaths. They stepped off into the pine barrens and murky swamps, a column of some 1,500 souls marching toward destiny. Little did they know, the path ahead wound through treacherous ground, where Patriot eyes watched and waited. The southern tinderbox was primed, and the first flames were about to leap. By mid-February, the Loyalist column snaked through the Carolina backcountry. In mid-February 1776, its commanders carried the weight of centuries-old martial traditions. At their head rode Brigadier General Donald MacDonald, a man etched by time and battle. Nearing 70, frail from illness, he nonetheless commanded respect as a seasoned officer who had fought in the wars of Europe and the earlier campaigns against the French in America. MacDonald embodied the rigid hierarchies of the Old World, where wars were waged with parade ground precision, where generals directed from afar, and where the clash of disciplined lines decided the day. His presence lent an air of legitimacy to the march, a symbol of the king's enduring authority. Yet, with his health faltering, the burden of field command fell increasingly to his deputy, Lieutenant Colonel Donald MacLeod. MacLeod was the fire to MacDonald's steady ember, younger, bolder, infused with the fierce spirit of the Highlands. He burned with a desire to redeem the valour of his clansmen, to prove that Scottish courage could shatter any foe. Like many officers schooled in European tactics, MacLeod placed his faith in the shock of the charge, the thunder of boots, the gleam of fixed bayonets, the unbreakable momentum that would scatter lesser men. These Loyalists, he believed, faced only ragged militias, farmers and tradesmen lacking the stomach for close-quarters steel. Discipline, bravery, and the king's cause would prevail. Raw rebels would break and flee. In quieter moments, MacDonald might reflect on the caprice of conflict, murmuring words that hinted at deeper doubts. "I am a true soldier of the king, but I have been poorly served by the fortune of war." Opposing them were men of a different mould, not forged in royal academies but shaped by the practical exigencies of colonial life. Colonel James Moore, the overall strategist of the Patriot forces, was a planter and merchant who thought like a chess master, anticipating moves, leveraging delays, and positioning his troops to control the board. He coordinated from afar, drawing on a network of scouts and riders to track the Loyalist advance. Closer to the action rode Colonel Richard Caswell, a lawyer and assemblyman thrust into command by the crisis. Methodical and unflappable, Caswell understood the pulse of the land, its winding roads, its hidden fords, its capacity to favour the defender. And leading the vanguard was Colonel Alexander Lillington, a local figure who arrived first at the critical juncture, his intimate knowledge of the terrain guiding every decision. These Patriot leaders were no professional soldiers. They lacked the polish of European drill. Yet they grasped the essence of this new war, the value of earth and cover, the power of well-timed volleys from concealed positions, the wisdom of patience over reckless glory. Where the Loyalists dreamed of decisive clashes that honoured ancient codes, the Patriots envisioned a grinding contest, using the landscape as an ally, trading space for time, and letting disciplined fire do the work of heroism. In the chill of that February, two visions of warfare converged on the Carolina coast. The Loyalists, steeped in the grandeur of bayonet and charge, marched with the certainty of victors reclaiming a wayward realm. The Patriots, adaptive and rooted in the soil, moved with quiet calculation, ready to exploit every shadow and stream. Two armies marched toward the same crossing, each convinced history was on their side, and neither fully understood the war they were about to fight. As the February chill deepened over the Carolina lowlands, the paths of the two armies converged on a single, fateful point, Moore's Creek Bridge. This was no grand river crossing, but a humble span of weathered wood arching over a sluggish Blackwater Creek, its waters inky and slow, stained by the tannins of ancient cypress roots. The creek wound through a labyrinth of swamp, where gnarled trees rose from soft, sucking ground, their knees probing the murk like silent sentinels. Tangled undergrowth choked the banks, vines and brambles weaving a natural barrier that funneled any traveller toward the bridge. Here, the land imposed its own rules. No easy fords, no hidden detours, only this narrow throat where movement must narrow to a thread. In the dim light of dusk, the place exhaled a heavy dampness, the air thick with the scent of decay and the faint gurgle of unseen currents. The Patriot forces, under Colonels Caswell and Lillington, arrived first, their scouts slipping ahead like shadows. They halted at the creek's edge, eyes scanning the gloom, and in that moment the significance struck them. The bridge as choke point, as gatekeeper to the coast. Without fanfare or flourish, they set to work under the gathering night. No rousing speeches echoed through the trees, no cheers broke the hush. These were men of the soil, farmers, hunters, locals who moved with the quiet efficiency of those accustomed to the land's whims. Lanterns were hooded low, voices kept to whispers as they fanned out along the banks, working by touch and instinct in the enveloping dark. To draw the eye and stir the mind, they kindled a deception on the far side of the creek, a camp laid out in plain view, fires crackling merrily against the night. Tents rose in orderly rows, silhouettes of men moving about as if in casual repose, suggesting an exposed force, perhaps overconfident or unaware. The flames danced on the water's surface, casting flickering illusions of vulnerability, a lure hanging in the humid air. But as the hours stretched, the Patriots executed their sleight of hand, a silent withdrawal, figures melting back across the bridge under the cloak of deepest shadow. Boots muffled on the planks, breaths held against the creak of wood, they reformed on the near bank, the landscape subtly reshaped in their wake. Through the long watches of the night, the work continued, deliberate, unseen. The bridge itself was altered with careful hands, its form adjusted to the Patriots' design. Earth was shifted in the soft ground, mounds rising where none had been, positions chosen amid the cypress knees and underbrush. Tools scraped faintly against soil, the sounds swallowed by the swamp's eternal murmur, the drip of moisture from overhanging limbs, the distant call of a night bird, the ceaseless whisper of the creek below. No detail was rushed. Each action layered tension into the silence, transforming the crossing from mere geography into something poised, expectant. By the time the last embers of the deceptive fires guttered out and the swamp reclaimed its profound quiet, the ground itself had been readied. The Loyalist column still pressed onward through the dark, unaware. The Patriots waited, vigilant in the shadows. All that remained was for dawn to break and the marchers to arrive. Dawn. The first grey light seeped through the fog on February 27, 1776. The Loyalist column emerged from the pines, weary but resolute. The air hung cold and damp, heavy with the night's mist, muffling sounds and blurring edges. Ahead lay the creek crossing, its bridge a faint outline in the haze. Smoke curled lazily from dying fires on the far bank, abandoned campsites, tents askew, no movement stirring. To the Highlanders, it screamed opportunity. The Patriots had fled in haste, panicked by the approach of true soldiers. Whispers rippled through the ranks. Victory was at hand, the path to the coast open. Caution evaporated, confidence surged like a tide. Lieutenant Colonel Donald MacLeod seized the moment, stepping forward as field commander while General MacDonald held back. He barked orders, rallying the vanguard, some 800 men, many clutching broadswords instead of muskets, relics of clan warfare ready for the charge. Officers led from the front, kilts swaying, faces set in grim determination. Bagpipes wheezed to life, a skirling drone cutting the fog, joined by guttural war cries in Gaelic. Discipline held them in tight formation. Courage propelled them onward, a wave of momentum building toward the bridge. They advanced ignorant, eyes fixed on the empty far shore, certain that steel and spirit would carry the day. The first boots hit the bridge planks, the wood groaning under weight. But the footing turned treacherous, slippery, uneven, the structure altered in ways unseen in the dim light. Men stumbled, broadswords clanging as they caught balance, the column crowding tighter in the narrow span. Officers pressed on, urging speed, but formation frayed at the edges, bodies bunching amid the slick timbers. Then, from the near bank's shadows, the defenders materialized, silhouettes rising from earthworks, muskets leveled at point-blank range. Confusion erupted, the Loyalists exposed mid-crossing, no room to maneuver. The Patriots held their fire until the bridge teemed with targets, then unleashed it in a shattering roar. Muskets cracked in unison, smoke billowing thick and acrid, bullets tearing through flesh and cloth. A deeper boom joined the fray, a cannon's blast, hurling grapeshot into the mass. Men jerked and fell, bodies crumpling onto the planks or pitching into the black water below, the creek churning red. Screams pierced the din, broadswords dropping useless as the advance dissolved into chaos. MacLeod, at the forefront, waved his sword high, bellowing commands amid the storm, until rounds struck him, once, twice, more, his form staggering before collapsing amid the press. Command shattered with him. The charge halted in an instant, momentum flipping to raw panic. Men turned, slipped, clawed back, the bridge a tangle of the fallen and fleeing. The volley slackened as quickly as it had begun, the fight over in mere minutes. Smoke lingered over the creek, drifting in the lifting fog. Bodies lay sprawled on the bloodied timbers, weapons abandoned in the murk. An unnatural silence descended, broken only by the creek's indifferent flow. In the space of those fractured minutes, the southern strategy lay broken at the swamp's edge. As the echoes of gunfire faded into the swamp, the Patriots emerged from their positions, stepping cautiously onto the bridge and its banks. Prisoners were rounded up in clusters, disarmed Highlanders, their kilts muddied and faces etched with shock, hands raised in surrender. The wounded were tended where they lay, moans punctuating the sudden quiet, while abandoned broadswords and muskets littered the timbers and the creek's edge. What had been a marching army dissolved in moments. Survivors scattered into the undergrowth or yielded without further fight, the Loyalist force ceasing to exist as a coherent command. General MacDonald himself was among the captured, his authority broken by the swift unravelling. The toll was stark and uneven, Loyalist losses numbered in the dozens killed or wounded, with hundreds more, around 850, taken prisoner. Patriot casualties were negligible, one man dead, another injured. The asymmetry underscored the morning's brutal efficiency, a force of tradition undone by preparation and position. This defeat rippled far beyond the creek. It punctured the illusion of widespread Loyalist fervour in the south, exposing Governor Martin's promises as overreach. In North Carolina, organising for the king ground to a halt. Potential recruits melted back into their farms and settlements, gripped by fear of reprisal and disillusionment with a cause that had crumbled so completely. The once confident calls to arms fell silent, replaced by a wary hush that stifled any nascent uprising. Weeks later, in early May, the British fleet under Cornwallis and Clinton finally anchored off the Cape Fear coast. Thousands of regulars, supplies in tow, ready to ignite the southern strategy. But the shore offered no welcome. No Loyalist army awaited them, no columns marching from the interior, no groundswell of support. The plan, so meticulously laid in London, faltered at its inception, defeated not by Washington's siege in the north, but by the delays of wind and wave, the grip of swampy terrain, and the fatal misjudgment of local resolve. In the wake of this reversal, North Carolina's Patriot leaders convened at Halifax, drawing a clear line from the bridge to the broader conflict. Reconciliation with the Crown, already strained, now seemed untenable. Loyalism's collapse had cleared the path for bolder action. On April 12, 1776, they adopted the Halifax Resolves, the first official colonial directive authorising delegates to vote for independence at the Continental Congress. It was a measured step, born of necessity, that shifted the revolution from defiance to declaration. On a narrow bridge in the Carolina swamps, the British lost not just a skirmish, but an entire blueprint for victory. From that muddy crossing onward, independence transformed from a distant hope into an inexorable tide, reshaping the war across a continent. As the echoes of Moore's Creek faded into the annals of a young revolution, early 1776 emerged as a pivotal hinge in the conflict, where fragile hopes of reconciliation gave way to the inexorable pull of separation. In the north, sieges dragged on under winter's grip. In the south, the inland dreams of Loyalist uprisings lay shattered amid the Cyprus and Blackwater. Yet Britain's resolve did not waver entirely. With ground forces thwarted by distance and division, the Empire's gaze turned seaward, where the might of the Royal Navy promised a different path to dominion, through cannonades from the waves, blockades of harbours, and assaults on coastal strongholds that could choke the rebellion at its ports. If the king's authority had faltered in the Carolina backcountry, British commanders were convinced it could yet be reclaimed from the quarterdecks of their men of war. The next trial would unfold not on muddy trails or hidden bridges, but along the sandy barriers guarding the South's bustling gateways to the sea. If you've been gripped by this gritty tale of revolution and resilience, consider subscribing to our channel for more immersive dives into the Revolutionary War's pivotal moments. A like and share would help spread these stories far and wide, ensuring the lessons of the past endure. Thank you for joining us in this journey back to the fires in the Age of Revolution. Until next time, remember, in the heat of battle, courage is forged.